if you've got a pension, what should you do? Not everybody has the cream. I don't know why I just said that, but the pension, it's something that a lot of people envy because it's a steady stream of income all the way through retirement. That's rare now. A lot of companies have gotten away from pensions completely. They've moved to 401ks, they've moved to individual responsibility, and they've moved away from guarantees. But if you served in the military, first of all, thank you. You may have a pension. If you worked for a government job or a local municipality, there's a good chance you have a pension. Different companies still have them as well, though they're much less common today. And if you're in that group, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with it. Because when you get close to retirement, the pension isn't just something that turns on. You're usually presented with choices, and those choices sound simple on the surface, but they can shape the rest of your financial life in ways most people don't fully understand when they're making them. Oftentimes, for most companies, you can take the pension as a lump sum, one large amount of money, or you can take it and just have it pay you every month for the rest of your life. And then if you're married or if you want to leave it to somebody else, there may be options to do that as well. Many plans require you to be married in order to leave a survivor benefit. But if you are married, they're going to say something like, well, you could take a lot less and provide fully for your spouse, or you could take just a sliver less and your spouse will get some, maybe 75% of what you're getting. Every pension is a little bit different. The rules vary. The math varies. The benefits vary. But the reality is the same. Once you choose, it's usually permanent. And that's why I want to slow this conversation down. Because when it comes to pensions, there are three big problems I see over and over again. These aren't small details. These are the things that quietly decide whether retirement feels comfortable or stressful, flexible or restrictive. The first one is liquidity. When I'm looking at pensions, one of the very first questions I ask is, what are you doing for liquidity when you retire? A lot of people have these big ideas in their head about retirement. They say, we're going to take this massive trip. And that's fine. You've worked your whole life, you've earned it, you've had a steady paycheck coming in for decades. And now the pension is going to replace that paycheck. But here's the difference. When you're retired, you want to have those years where you're actually living a little. And you don't want to be throwing everything on a credit card because that's one of the worst decisions you can make, especially right now with interest rates where they are. The pension pays steadily. That's its strength, but it doesn't pay flexibly. So if you need to purchase a car, take a vacation, handle a major home repair, or relocate to a different state or city, you've got to think very differently when you have a pension. A pension is great at covering monthly expenses. It's not great at covering one-time expenses. This is where a lot of retirees get stuck. They say, we have enough income, but we don't have access to cash. And that's a dangerous position to be in. If you're still working and you know a pension is coming, this is the time to start thinking through your options. Oftentimes you'll have a TSP, a 457, a 401k, an IRA, or another type of savings account. These accounts aren't just extra, they're critical. You want to start building liquidity in these accounts so you have what I like to call a slush fund for retirement. That way, when you retire and you're living on the steady pension income, and then you say, all right, let's go buy the car, you already have the money. When you say we need to replace the roof, the money is there. When you decide to take that once-in-a-lifetime trip early in retirement, you're not financing your lifestyle with debt. Liquidity is what turns a pension from something that just pays bills into something that actually supports a life. And the mistake people make is assuming the pension itself will handle everything. It won't. Now, the second issue is converting dollars when you have a pension. This is where things start to get more technical, but also more important. If you have a pension, you're going to have steady income. And that means you're going to live in a fairly consistent federal tax bracket. This scenario may not be your exact scenario, but let's walk through an example. Let's say you retire at age 62. Your pension starts. You now have taxable income every year. You may have some years where you spend more. Maybe you buy a car. Maybe you take a big trip. Maybe you self-fund some long-term care expenses later on. You're pulling from other assets during those times. But overall, your tax bracket stays pretty steady. Compare that to someone who retires without a pension. Oftentimes, that person will spend down pre-tax accounts first. Then maybe later in life, they start tapping Roth accounts. Their tax picture changes over time. They may have lower income years early on that create opportunities. But with a pension, those low income years may never really exist. And here's where people get into trouble. If you have a pension, you may not need money from your retirement accounts early on. So you let them sit, they grow, and that sounds like a good thing. But eventually, you run into something called required minimum distributions, RMDs. RMDs are mandatory. The government is going to require you to take money out of your pre-tax accounts, whether you need it or not. And when that happens, those withdrawals stack on top of your pension income and on top of Social Security. Now you're in a higher tax bracket than you expected. And the painful part is that this happens later in life when your ability to adjust is much smaller. If you haven't done, any tax planning, if you haven't considered Roth accounts, conversions, or strategic withdrawals, those RMDs can quietly drain a massive amount of wealth over time. This is why converting dollars matters. It's not about avoiding taxes altogether. It's about controlling when and how you pay them. And with a pension, that window is narrower than most people realize. You have to think through this early. You have to think long term, because once the pension, Social Security, and RMDs all collide, the tax bill becomes very hard to manage. And that leads into the third issue, which is the one people avoid thinking about the most: an untimely death. When you're setting up your pension, you're not just planning for yourself. If you have a spouse or a significant other, you're planning for them too, whether you realize it or not. How are you setting up your pension if you pass away earlier than expected? What does that income look like for the survivor? In one scenario I worked through, a government pension paid out fully to the retiree, but the spouse would only receive 55% if the retiree passed away. On paper, everything looked fine until we changed one variable. What if the retiree passes away at age 70? They're currently 62. They've only been retired for a few years. Suddenly, the plan changes dramatically. The probability of long-term success drops sharply. The difference between having a financial buffer and slowly running out of money becomes very real. In that scenario, one approach left roughly $500,000 by the end of retirement. Another approach, slightly different pension setup, coordinated with other assets, left over $2 million. That difference isn't luck. It's planning. And this is where many people go wrong. They say, I'll just take the pension for me and I'll figure something else out for my spouse. That's not always the best plan. Sometimes taking a slightly lower pension payout creates more flexibility. Sometimes coordinating investments alongside the pension creates a better long-term outcome. Sometimes the goal isn't maximizing the monthly check, it's maximizing stability. And that's the part pensions don't explain to you. They give you options. They don't tell you which one fits your life. That's why you really need to think this through. Not emotionally, not quickly, but intentionally. Figure out what's best for your specific situation, your age, your health, your spouse, your other assets, your goals. A pension is powerful, but it's rigid. It does exactly what it's designed to do, and nothing more. Liquidity fills the gaps. Tax planning prevents future problems. Survivor planning protects the people you care about. If you found this helpful, take a second and interact with the video. It helps more people find it. And if you're getting close to retirement or already there, don't rush these decisions. The earlier you understand how your pension actually works, the more control you'll have over your future. Thanks for watching.